Hello, Internet world. I'm Lisa Yee Swope. I'm one of the booksellers at Bookmarks, and it is my honor and privilege to host the Flying South 4-on-4th event. As a matter of course, over the year, I host the 4-on-4th events with Winston-Salem writers, and this is the one and only event we get to hold in these interesting times for this fall semester. But we are currently accepting submissions for the spring semester, and the 4-on-4th leaders for that, Matthew and Bart and I, are going to get together soon and go over them. So if you are an author interested in presenting with 4-on-4th on the fourth Wednesdays of January, February, March, April, you can go to bookmarksnc.org. Towards the top, towards the right, there's Get Involved for writers and authors about 4-on-4th, and put in your submission there. I am really, really pleased that due to Steve Lindahl's amazing leadership, Winston-Salem Writers is onto its onto its 7th compilation of Flying South. I've got 4s on the brain, but 7 years worth of Flying South, so congrats for that. A couple of things to be aware of with this event. It is being taped for posterity, so if you're not able to join us this evening, the broadcast link, it's the same Crowdcast link, crowdcast.io/e/Flying South, that will be available for ongoing rebroadcast. And just in terms of being good people in the world we have today, the Bookmarks Code of Conduct is as follows. Bookmarks has a zero tolerance policy for harassment of any kind, in person or social media, including but not limited to stalking, intimidation, offensive verbal comments, physical assault and/or battery, harassing or non-consensual photography or recording, sustained disruption of programs, panels, signings, or other events, bathroom policings, inappropriate physical contact, unwelcome physical attention in relation to but not related to race, color, national origin, gender identity, gender presentation, sexual orientation, age, body size, ability, appearance, religion, citizenship, or pregnancy. If a person engages in harassing behavior, Bookmark staff will take prompt action in any form they deem appropriate, including but not limited to expulsion from Bookmark-sponsored events or premises. This policy applies to everyone, including exhibitors, attendees, authors, speakers, guests, press, staff, board members, and volunteers at all of Bookmarks events and programming. Anyone can report harassment, and if someone's behavior has made you uncomfortable or you've witnessed the same happening to someone else, you should immediately contact Bookmark staff or security. In this virtual landscape, we ask that you remain respectful as you would at an in-person event. We will remove and ban you from virtual events if you submit any inappropriate content, offensive, or of any nature that does not pertain to the event visually, verbally, or in written content. So, oh goodness, after that light bit, let's turn it over to the authors. I want to invite up Steve Lindahl, our fearless leader, and he'll be introducing the evening and the authors. He'll be emceeing.
Let's see. Here it goes. Oh, there I am. First of all, I need to apologize. There's a little reverb in my system that I couldn't get out. So I am going to turn my volume down here and turn it back up again when I'm done speaking. But anyway, I want to say that the 2020 issue of Flying South is our 7th annual, although its history goes back further than that. The journal began as a way to publish the work of members of Winston-Salem writers, but 2 people in our group, Robin Cholke and Ann Civitano, decided to open it up. They changed the name, established the competition, and published the first 2 issues. When they both decided to leave to concentrate on their own writing, we put together a team of editors, upped the prizes, and started advertising. Today, Flying South continues to grow. The journal now has a worldwide reputation and has become very competitive. We have published work from writers living all over the world as long as they write in English. For this issue, our editors were Mary Hennessy for poetry, Jennifer Stevenson Vincent for creative nonfiction, Bob Shar for fiction, along with Ray Morrison and myself, who served as fiction readers. We accept submissions each year from March 1st through May 31st. All submissions must be entered online through our submittable website and will be read blind. Because we read blind, the work stands on its own. As a result, I'm very proud that this year we published Bleeding Yellow by Leon Reese, a high school student, alongside the work of other writers with long resumes. The most important prize is publication, but there are also monetary prizes. We give out $2,000 each year, which includes $500 each for the Best in Category winners and an extra $500 for the President's Favorite Award, chosen by the president of Winston-Salem Writers from the 3 Best in Category winners. This year, our president is Bart Genzer. Tonight's reading is a combination of 2 Winston-Salem writer projects, Flying South and 4 on 4th, which Lisa was mentioning before. 4 on 4th is a monthly reading at Bookmarks Bookstore, where 4 readers read their work on the 4th Wednesday of each month. This year, COVID has cut into all the Winston-Salem writers' readings, but with this event, we're trying to get something going online, and we've chosen a talented group of writers, all with work in this year's Flying South. So on to the reading. Our first reader is Barbara West. Barbara lives in Davis, California. Her work-in-progress memoir uses misrememberings of the movie Edward Scissorhands to explore the tension between Christian/Buddhist directives to help each other and her 12-step recovery program's directive to focus on yourself. West is the author of a collection of poetry and prose, And I Felt the Simple Sweetness of Me, published by Cold River Press in 2017. Her work has been published in many journals, and her performance videos have won awards in film festivals around the world. She works as a wound ostomy nurse, and with that, I would like to just welcome Barbara.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm thrilled to do this. I'm just gonna dive right in. Let's see, I just wanna make sure I've got my angle right here so I don't cut off the top of my head. Okay. The first taste of relief I had was during high school, when Cindy's mom decided that all teenage girls should take a rape prevention class. Our mom agreed this was a good idea, so Cindy, my sister Jennifer, and I enrolled in a series of classes with Carla Grant. Ladies, we have today and the next 5 Saturday mornings to work together. It is imperative that you attend every class on time. On a physical level, what I will teach you is tiny, a few simple but powerful moves, a fraction of the martial arts repertoire I have spent my life studying. But on a psychological level, what we cover will be enormous. She stopped speaking for a moment, letting us absorb her words from our seats in the basement classroom at UC Davis. 20 or so women and girls, all shapes and sizes, wearing sweatpants and t-shirts. She spoke quietly, without apparent effort, but her voice permeated the room. She was tiny, with long, wavy, light brown hair tucked behind her ears. Every motion, her hand making a short chop in the air for emphasis, or the way she paced back and forth in front of the blackboard, exuded power and control. The physical techniques I teach you will require practice at home during the week. I am confident that each one of you can master them, but they will not be useful to you unless you address your mindset. No matter how skilled you are, you cannot defend yourself from rape until you address the victim tapes that have been imprinted in women's minds by American culture. Her index fingers quickly tapped her temples, then offered themselves, palms opening toward us. Ladies, please do not think I partake in blame the victim thinking. Our traditional socialization teaches women first to be victims, and secondly, to internalize the blame for their offender's behavior. Just as we are responsible for ourselves, the offender is responsible for his own behavior. But in order for us to not become the next victim, we must first address the unconscious programming we've received. She tapped her temples again before her hands swung quickly down to rest on the air below her hips, like a Wild West hero reaching for familiar holsters. She paused, walked noiselessly across the front of the room, turned to face us again. Several of the techniques I am going to teach you can cause permanent injury or death. There is no point in learning these unless you are willing to use them without hesitation if you are ever attacked. By this point, we were hardly surprised to find Carla reading our minds. If you find you're reluctant to cause permanent injury or death to an attacker, then think instead about what you would be willing to do to defend someone else. Think about a child you love. What would you be willing to do to defend a child from rape, injury, or death? She gave us a long pause to think that one over. Jennifer and I flashed on our 4-year-old sister, Sarah, grinning in her goggles in the backyard pool, learning to swim freestyle that spring. Big arms, Sarah! Ice cream scoopers! There was no doubt in our minds that we would, without hesitation, maim or kill anyone who threatened her. Then, the back and forth rhythm between Carla's permeating voice and our unspoken thoughts gaining momentum, she asked, "Why wouldn't you do the same for yourself? Why aren't you as precious to yourself as that child is to you?" Cindy, Jennifer, and I pondered this all week. We talked it over with our moms. We decided we were willing to give it a try, to consider ourselves precious enough to be worth killing for. We weren't sure how that fit with Jesus's teachings, but we already trusted Carla enough to be willing to learn. Today, ladies, you are going to learn the power of your own voice. In order to do this, you will relinquish any ideas you have of properness or ladylike behavior. Let's all stand up now so we can employ our abdomens full power. We pulled ourselves up from our chairs and copied Carla's low, wide stance, one foot slightly forward, toes pointing straight ahead. She had us place our hands on our bellies, our seat of power, she said. She taught us how to draw our breath in down low, which we were proud to already know about from choir practice. The special shout we would learn, called a ki, had to come from deep down. A good ki is so startling to a would-be attacker, it will likely be the only tool you'll ever need. Jennifer and I looked at each other, relieved to hear this, because we knew Jesus couldn't have much problem with that. As we turned our faces back towards her, Carla's ki hurtled through the basement air, permeated each molecule of our bodies, and pinned the soles of our tennis shoes to the cement floor. It took a beat for our hearts to restart. We were terrified. We were elated. She had us practice as a group until we could feel our collective shout travel through the steel structure of the building to the uppermost empty floors and through the roof, signaling to the universe that we were irrevocably changed from the compliant young women we'd been when we'd walked in the previous Saturday. Then Carla had us practice the ki one by one until our last nervous giggle swallowed itself down the well of a deep quiet. The ki was our homework for that week. Cindy and Jennifer and I got together to practice. It was hard to make yourself do it on your own, even at home with no one there. When you did it right, it seemed that the ceiling might cave in. When you really did it right, it felt very, very good. Who could have predicted that 6 Saturday morning classes would leave a lifelong mark? In the teachings of Carla Grant, feminism and pacifism would meet at a bitter crossroads. When it was over, pacifism would limp into the bushes, nursing a black eye, leaving our valiant sisters in the middle of the intersection, deeply shaken and stronger. Where in her classic 70s feminist way, their mother would remain obligated to take offense at any man opening the door, Barbara could now relish this rare recognition of her femininity while carrying ready keys in her fist, the longest sharply protruding from between clenched knuckles, prepared for whatever in a midnight parking lot might await. Having internalized Carla's teachings, the sisters could then afford to shave their legs and go to the prom. Feminine power had a new grit that refused to be diminished by chivalry, mascara, or miniskirts. They had, thanks to their love for 4-year-old Sarah, considered killing. They practiced their jabs, heel stomps, and eye gouges while 300 years of pacifist ancestors looked on from the afterlife in horror. They learned about the anatomical parts that rendered men vulnerable and how to work this to their advantage. After centuries of pounding swords into plowshares, they reversed the process, sharpened shouts into weapons. Chronic inherited resentment melted into awareness and simple confidence. A Buddhist might say they took their seat. The girls each took their own place in the night. They explored the edges of where their bodies ended and others began, where others ended and they began. In the next class, Carla brought up an even more difficult topic. We'd already decided, sorry, Jesus, we were willing to kill, but now she asked us, would you be willing to die? Women are often raped because they believe death is the only alternative. What if you decided you'd rather die than be raped? I'm not advocating that point of view, Carla said, as she paced lightly back and forth across the huge classroom, her hair streaming out behind, tiny body like a big cat on habitual rounds in her too small cage. It's a personal decision only you can make for yourself, and it can change. The fact is that most rapists are not murderers. So adopting an attitude of defending yourself to the death can be a useful psychological tool. And in the rare case of a rapist who was planning to murder you, would you rather be raped first or murdered first? We have choices here, ladies, she would remind us again and again. Carla's words echoed in our minds as we wandered from our lockers to calculus or trigonometry. While we pedaled home on the green belt, dodging dog walkers, we felt stretched by vectors of the new equations she'd laid out for us. We felt a silent ki in our core while we practiced dance routines for the high school musical. The quiet, precise brutality of Carla's words liberating us from invisible constraints, sending us forth to tenderly bodyguard ourselves out into the imperfect and dangerous width of this world. Thank you.
Oh, that was so powerful and beautifully read. So thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much from all of us. Now our second reader tonight is Rick Forbes. Rick is a 72-year-old emerging writer with 8 published short fiction pieces. His wife, daughter, and he migrated from Texas to Maine almost 4 decades ago, and there they happily remain. Since retirement from a long career in the mental health field, he has read more, written more, and worked on refining how to approach both. Rick?
Thank you. Okay, the story I'm reading is the Walnut Concertos. The concertos began when Duty first encountered Thomas a month earlier. She was walking across the quadrangle after leaving social skills class, and he was walking in the opposite direction, straight toward her, talking to himself. The first few bars of Bach's Concerto in A major filled her ears when they passed, and then ended after a few more steps. Duty thought she may have been hallucinating, but when she turned and caught up with him, she heard the concerto again. She stopped, and Thomas walked on. Duty went straight to her room, got in bed, pulled the covers over her head. "I'm Duty Schwartz. I'm a cello player," she whispered to herself. "I'm Duty Schwartz. I'm a murderer," she countered. She debated with herself for some time like this, stopping after each declaration to reflect. The slight possibility that the cello player, Duty, could be reborn, she decided, was a miracle. She wondered if Thomas was an angel, a real angel, not another resident, like it seemed. She thought it must be true, but knew not to tell anyone. They would think she was still insane. Several times a week in the rec room, with the TV on in the background or alone in the hallway late at night, Duty listened to Thomas speak and waited for the music to begin. His words hovered before floating upward through the ceiling and drifting over the countryside as the melody filled the space around them. The topic might have been the distance of the Earth from the nearest non-sun star, or the multiverse theory, or the joys of composting, or lately, black walnut trees. Thomas knew a great deal about nearly everything, and it seemed to Duty that he wanted to tell her about all of it. The music would start when he spoke, and the sadness, fear, and anger that lurked in her heart shrunk to the size of a pea. Thomas was in his own space, a place he seemed comfortable with, and that made it possible for him to be at ease with others. He was not fearful, nor to be feared, wounded, nor angry, and the music Duty heard when he spoke was a powerful tonic. Neither the medication, nor the cheerleading to recover, nor the field trips to the mall were a match for the elixir that was Thomas. It was unclear to Duty at times whether Thomas had appeared out of thin air, or if she just hadn't noticed that he was there the whole time. Once she asked him this question point blank when they were standing in the cafeteria serving line. One moment she was alone, and the next Thomas was standing behind her holding his empty tray. He smiled at the question and said, "What do you think?" "I don't know, that's why I asked," she replied. "You seem like a person who can do whatever you want to, Thomas, and it's not because you're so tall." Thomas glanced around the large room. "Over there," he gestured with a nod. "Let's take the table next to the window. We can soak up some photons." Know what photons are? Elementary particles that also have the properties of a wave. You got to know your quantum mechanics to really get it, and that's a tall order for any person. They sat together at the table, Thomas talking and Duty waiting for the music as she ate. Her slice of pizza was half eaten when she heard a familiar opening bar from a piece she could not quite name at first. But then, "That's Vivaldi," she said. Concerto for violin and cello in B-flat major." "You're one of a kind, Duty," Thomas said. A week after Duty's first encounter with Thomas, she and he stood at the end of a hallway hidden in the shadows from the nurse's station. It was late and she wasn't able to sleep. "Julens nigra," Thomas spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Common name, Eastern black walnut, aka money tree." Right away, his words grew fainter and were barely audible to Duty under the lilting melody. "Both the wood and the nuts are valuable," Thomas continued. "And on top of that, you can boil the sap to make syrup, which would be a nice little novelty item. They're hardy and easy to grow too. Just plant a couple of hundred. Tend to them for 20 years or so, and you're a millionaire. That's pretty much all there is to it. The return on investment averages about 14% a year. Call it the walnut IRA." As the last notes faded, Duty hugged Thomas, and it was not something fleeting and awkward. She wrapped both arms tightly around him with her head buried in his chest and held on. Thomas stood with his arms to his sides, unmoving for an uncomfortably long few seconds before gently resting the side of his face on the top of Duty's head and speaking, still in a near whisper. "Ever heard of Valles Marineris, second largest canyon in the universe? It's up on Mars, and it's 2,500 miles long, 120 miles deep as Mount Everest is high." Duty did not answer, but Thomas responded as if she had. "Well, we got the Great Rift right here on Earth, and it's bigger, and people walk out of it all the time, so you just may do the same." Over the course of a few days, Duty began to sleep better and smile more often, follow the ward rules, participate in activities, and even complimented staff on their appearance. The changes were surprising, and when the expected return of the surly, withdrawn, non-compliant Duty didn't happen, a measure of self-congratulatory optimism emerged among the treatment team members. During the next case review, their observations and perspectives about reasons and implications were reported and debated, and the possibility of her discharge was discussed for the first time. Dr. Bobo listened, nodding his head and smiling until they finished, and then reminded the team that Duty would have to display an extended period of stability before discharge could be considered. He expressed concerns that she may be experiencing a manic swing that will lead to a hard landing when it ends. Dr. Bobo was Duty's psychiatrist. Once a month or so, they met in his office for 5 or 10 minutes, and he asked her a few questions that never varied in content or order. Her answers were the same each time. "No, yes, sort of, I guess so." not yet, and no. Dr. Bobo smiled the whole time in a way that Dodie thought was inappropriate for the situational context and made her feel uncomfortable. Inappropriate affect, she thought. In their first meeting, he asked her a question that she had been answering for years. What does the saying, people who live in glass houses should not throw stones mean? Dodie thought it was the lamest question ever. The answer was obvious. They would ruin their house. But because she thought it was an insulting question to ask someone you just met, she said, "That's a stupid question. I won't answer it." Dr. Bobo kept smiling and bent his head to the laptop keyboard to enter her answer. "Keep taking your meds," he always said when they parted. The day after her case review, Dodie arrived on time for the resident unit meeting without prompts from the staff. When the routine question, "Does anyone have anything you want to share?" was asked, she raised her hand. The staff facilitator and the few residents who were paying attention turned to Dodie, surprised by her unprecedented behavior. "I want to share that I'll be leaving Sky Haven before long. I'll miss some of you, I really will, but it's time for me." One resident applauded vigorously, while another asked, "When do you get out of this nut house?" Before Dodie could respond, the facilitator broke in. "A lot of planning and preparation has to go on before someone is discharged, and also the judge would have to give the green light. Have you given any thought to what you'd do, where you'd live, any of that?" "Of course I have," Dodie replied. "I'm going to have an eastern black walnut orchard." As soon as she uttered the sentence, she heard the opening notes of a concerto, but the music faded in absence of Thomas speaking. News of Dodie's plan traveled far and fast among the staff, and when it reached Dr. Bobo, he arranged for an evaluation session with her the next day. In addition to the usual questions about hearing voices, taking her medication, whether she was getting along with staff and residents, etc., he probed to learn more about the reasons for the change in her mood lately and about what she had shared in residents' council. He was concerned, he explained to her. "Some residents get in their head to be discharged before they are ready, and when I tell them this, they become angry or depressed. I hope you won't have that reaction, Dodie, but you aren't ready now. I will have to convince a judge that you can live in the community with proper treatment and support and no longer be a risk to society. That is what I want to do, but I cannot do it now. Do you agree?" "You can't or you won't?" she asked. Ignoring the question, he said, "Now, Dodie, I understand it is an orchard, one with nuts, that you plan to own when you leave here. But you have no orchard with nuts. You have no money to buy the orchard, do you?" She did not respond, so he continued. "My grandparents immigrated to California from the Philippines in the 1920s, and when my father was a teenager, he worked alongside them harvesting grapes. It was such hard work with very little pay. My grandparents and father were so worn out and so desperate that they returned to their homeland where my father met my mother. I know that keeping an orchard of nuts is something you cannot do. Also, it was a very serious crime you committed. You understand this. You have told me you do." Dodie's memory of driving the car into the lake was always close by except when she heard the concertos. She didn't clearly recall the details of that day, nor of the several days before, but she remembers the voices commanding her and the ice-cold water flooding the interior of the car. She remembers rolling the window down and being surprised that the water level was no deeper than the top of the front door. She remembers standing on the shore in her shock at seeing Sarah Sue's long black hair floating on the top of the water in the back seat just a few feet away. She remembers the judge saying, "Not guilty by reason of insanity." She remembers that she wasn't allowed to attend her sister's funeral. Thomas had told her that every patient, they were called residents in this place, had a legal right to read his or her chart, and Duty wanted to judge where she stood in Dr. Bobo's eyes, so she made a request to read his most recent progress assessment. Dr. Bobo felt that Duty's therapeutic gain had been minimal since her admission to the hospital 2 years ago. He wrote that her thinking was often grandiose and that there was a consistent delusional element to her cognitive process. She didn't totally understand all the terms, but knew it was not a favorable report. What does that Dodo Bobo know? She wondered. After reading the report, she went back to her room under the covers to sort it all out. Dr. Bobo would change his mind if he knew how well I am, she whispered to herself, if he knew about Thomas and the music. He had always said that if she had a really important reason, he would speak to her between their scheduled sessions. So the next morning, rather than go to horticultural therapy, she waited for Dr. Bobo under a tree next to the parking lot and asked for a meeting as they walked side by side from his car toward his office. He agreed to see her that afternoon and said that he would pass the word on to the ward staff. Duty thanked him, and when he closed the office door, she turned to find Thomas standing there in front of her. The morning sun was streaming in from a high window almost directly behind him, casting a sheet of light that glowed around his silhouetted outline. "Thomas, where did you come from?" Duty asked. It is true that it takes effort and persistence to grow, harvest, and shell eastern black walnuts, but they are the most delicious of all walnuts, Thomas said, disregarding the question. That's Bach again, cello suite number 1 in G, Duty said, closing her eyes, leaning back on the corridor wall. Thomas was nowhere to be seen when the music ended. The meeting with Dr. Bobo began awkwardly for Duty. She didn't know how to start and was having second thoughts about whether it would be helpful to disclose the miracle or not. "What do you want to discuss, Duty?" Dr. Bobo asked. "I don't know if it's a discussion or not, more like I've been thinking of telling you something," Duty replied. "Okay, anything you like." "Well, it's kind of hard to explain it." "Yes, I understand. Some things are difficult to bring up, but also necessary for the better," he said. "Is this the case for you now?" Duty held a steady gaze and put both hands over her mouth until she could no longer hold back. Hardly taking a breath, her words gushed out in a torrent. "Thomas is a resident here. I think he may be my guardian angel, a real angel. When he speaks, I hear concertos, and that's why I've been in such a good mood. He knows all about eastern black walnuts and a whole lot more. I think he wants me to own an eastern black walnut orchard, and he'll be there to help me. Please don't hold any of this against me or think I'm crazy." Dr. Bobo leaned back in his chair and then forward to rest his elbows on the desk with his hands clasped. "So you believe there is an angel who will help you with the orchard of walnuts. I see. Now tell me, Duty, who is this Thomas?" Staring at her feet, Duty answered softly, He's a resident. I don't know what unit he's on. It doesn't matter. He can show up wherever he wants to." Duty, there are 53 residents living in our forensic units, and I know half of them personally. I'm aware of the other half, even though I'm not their psychiatrist. There is no Thomas among them. I'm sure of this. And none of the residents here is an angel, Dr. Bobo said. "I knew you wouldn't believe me. You think I'm crazy," Duty said. Now, that is an unkind and unprofessional term. You have a mental illness. There should be no shame about that. But this illness makes you see and hear angels. They are not real, Dr. Bobo said, as he leaned to his left to pick up his pen, which had rolled off the desk. When he straightened and turned to Duty, a rather tall man was standing next to the chair where Duty sat. Billions of years from now, the universe will be a cold and lonely place because all the galaxies would have traveled so far apart as the universe and time itself expands, Thomas said. I'm sorry, you're in the wrong office. Where are you going? Can I give you directions? Dr. Bobo asked Thomas and discreetly reached for the phone to dial security. Duty was lost to it all, floating on the notes of Schumann's Concerto for Cello and Orchestra in A minor. But Dr. Bobo turned his attention to Thomas, who was still talking about the expanding universe. You must leave now. I'm this woman's psychiatrist, and this is a confidential session. Thomas switched topics and continued talking while Duty rested comfortably at her chair with her eyes closed, humming a melody. In the 1930s, Thomas began, Filipino immigrants worked the grape orchards of California and were often brought in as strikebreakers to take jobs from Mexicans and poor whites. They were all desperate people just trying to feed and shelter their families. Dr. Bobo closed his eyes and his chin sunk to his chest. What is that lovely melody? He asked. Thank you.
Well, Rick, that was great. Powerful ending. Very powerful ending. Loved your reading of it too. So we've got 2 for 2, and that's been great so far. Our next reader is Sandra Dreiss. She is a local writer. As an emerging poet, Sandra works with a critique group of Winston-Salem writers and attends workshops given by North Carolina Writers Network and Press 53. She has enjoyed a terrific creative summer in Vermont attending Breadloaf. Oh, that must have been nice. For 12 years, she taught drama in the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Public Schools and taught poetry writing for the Arts Connection team. Her debut young adult fiction, The Eco Warriors, The Bluffs of Baraboo, received a Silver Nautilus Award, Environmental, in 2016, as well as an excellent Kirkus review. Because she sees life in snapshots increasingly as she gets older, wiser, her focus is on writing and reading poetry. The recent edition of Creosote features her poetry. So here she is, Sandra. Looking forward to hearing you.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. I couldn't hear you, Steve. Okay, good. You can hear me. I'm going to get right in. My first poem here is Driving While Editing. She's editing again. Whirs this version in the food processor. Eyes the Foley food mill, still in the box. A gift from foodie relative in LA. The bread knife proves its worth, slicing sentences. She juliennes line breaks, ponders paragraph placement. The kitchen fan blows serrated words. Paper bag holds enough flour to bread her crumpled rejects, soon to be deep fried fricatives, thin crispy consonants. She tosses her flowered apron, craving distraction. Buys tickets online, heads to movies, brain full of possibly perfect ending lines, better titles. She forgets headlights, runs red light, ignores siren and flashing signal. Rookie cop nabs her. Driver's license and registration, ma'am. Oh, go on, officer. Arrest me. Murder one. I butchered my poem. The Old Country. A feudal argument carbonates. My brain feels like the knee-high grape soda that I want. And my flushed cheeks, well, they're the dark, sweet cherries in the brown bag that Grandpa tosses. A pale employee makes the checkout catch. But Grandpa continues his grocery spiel as I grow smaller and smaller like a melting popsicle. Gonifs, thieves, I'm telling you. Cherries in the old country, they were 3 cents a pound. 3 pennies. Go on, keep your fancy cherries. I'm 13, Flushing, Queens, 1965. And his loud voice, his foreign accent overwhelms. I need to hide, burrow. Instead, blocked by Grandpa's large gestures, I smile big and I turn my back to blend in with the baseball card, bubblegum, and the assorted lifesavers. The cash register clangs. A dozen shoppers gather to witness Grandpa's matinee. Grateful this isn't 8 shows a week, I abandon my unpaid, humiliated bottle of grape soda and flee, mash the heavy door, pant as if pursued by evil Tsar Nikolai himself. I breathe, safe on Main. A rerun. I picture the familiar grocery store scenario. Grandpa slaps down 2 soggy dollar bills, harvests coins one at a time from his girly change purse. He stalks out of the A&P, clutching 1 bag, bread, butter, and milk. Tweed sport jacket masks Dr. Hyde, the shopper. Outside, the stinky buses belch, doors open, hiss, mass transit passing gas, kerchiefed passengers exit. Grandpa eyes me on the sidewalk, hands me the bundle, squeaks open his rolling cart. Ancient. We take up the whole street, the whole city. The rusty basket wobbles, bumps my ankles. There's no point in saying what he cannot hear. At 80, Grandpa's oversized ears hardly work. Besides, he's mine. So for once, I control my teenage fuse and I only think it. Oh, Grandpa, this is America, not the old country. How I want my grape soda, those dark, sweet cherries. Hoofers. This is Hoofers 6 feet apart, my COVID poem. Deer, slender legs, a chorus line. They clump and cramp roll down my neighbor's brick pathway. Party crashers leaving a no more than 10 gathering. Did I say dawn? I stare. I wonder, did they scarf up chips? Franks in a blanket? Spinach artichoke dip? What about the potted pansies? Blurry without glasses, I swear they're wearing silk scarves and shades as they clatter to the curb. They launch into a clean 180. They dive into the pink sky. They clear a 6-foot fence into paltry forest, swift, silent, an email whoosh of a getaway. I step out barefoot, cold asphalt. Could that be dropped on the ground an Emilio Pucci scarf? I race inside for coffee and brain sugar. Quarantine comfort, Raisin Bran. I take my time, count the raisins. This is Raven's Beak. But you'd have to understand Raven's Beak. Drive that comes before all else. Plunges for praying mantis, plucks, disbands dirt, stabs a wrangled tuft of weed. And you'd have to be the bird, inhabit black eyes that beam location. Yes, stealing sweetness even from the cocky cat. Feasting on envy, this hunger lives beyond prey, I tell you. A wild want not to be tamed by blood, sinew, or travail. In dreams, I gather others. I grow feathers and wait. And this is a poem, Aunt Nellie. Petite Aunt Nellie defies pretty. Its surface, allure, 2 dimensions made 3. The how of it. I'm 12. I want her secrets. She's brunette, dark, sparkly eyes, melamine skin, no visible pores. Unlike Mom, efficient, no frills school teacher, always minus makeup. Well, maybe just lipstick. Basic buttoned up style, permanent press, no iron, top to bottom. Hair, aquanet finish. I need a guided tour of Nellie's walk-in closet. Assorted wigs on styrofoam, the stacked hat boxes, the satin makeup bag filled with tubes and potions, perfume atomizers and delicate colored bottles, every shape. My aunt catches me squinting, grading my face, magnifying mirror, a monster, unforgiving, forgettable chin, light eyelashes, pale brows, oversized ears, chandelier lobes, and frizzy hair that hides them. Substantial nose, a bit too wide. Nellie, my advisor, she gives me the go-ahead, suggests makeup. Oh, my self-regard circles the drain. She's hinting I'm kind of plain. Nellie directs my makeover. Beauty wizard, one in hand, liquid eyeliner, turquoise shadow, brow highlights, blackest mascara. Pressed powder subdues shine, rose lipstick accents pursed lips. Coral blush, cheekbones emerge. Big striking eyes, magazine glamour. I grin. I picture high heels, a matching handbag, a silk scarf, a big hair wig. No, a straight wig. Voila. Nellie's sequin dress, emerald green, full length, bra sewn in. I slip it on, get tangled, untangled, peek out. Door squeaks open. Freeze frame. It's Mom. Ironology. Iron, indulge in the OCD of it. The rapture of wrinkle reduction, compression of stress, flattening of cares. Trust worries to the calming board. Go on, steam away. Start small, cotton handkerchief or bandana on highest setting. Save the door gears, those ever-curling corners, for last. Crisp comfort of a perfect square. King bed sheets, perfection's addiction, that endless expanse. The challenge of the collared shirt, maneuvering between buttons, glide, smooth cosmic bumps. Go on, steam away. And finally, a shorty, Ode to Carbonation. If water is the classic, you are the jazz. Your rippling notes scat my tonsils and sass my throat. Whereas H2O glides, your bubble magic marches. It plays vibes, overrides my wild summer parches. Fizzles and such, these social influencers elicit sighs without fuss. Abrupt excuse me when loud burps percuss. Thank you.
Bring me back. Loved it. And I loved your attention to detail, and I could definitely see your theater arts background in that reading. So it was beautiful. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Sound.
Nope. Nobody can hear me?
Anybody here?
Nobody can hear me?
Uh-oh.
Oh, I hear. Okay, some people can. Well, for those of you who can hear me, I will now introduce the fourth reader. Our fourth reader is our Best in Category Award for Poetry, Emily Wilmer. Emily is a spiritual director, retreat leader, licensed lay preacher, liturgist, and writer of poems, co-director of Oasis of Wisdom, Institute for Contemplative Study, Practice, and Living. Her poems have appeared in Kakalak, Sufi Journal, Thomas Merton Poetry of the Sacred Finalists, Great Smokies Review, North Carolina Poetry Society Poetry of Courage Award winner, second place, and Flying South 2019. So she was in 2 issues in a row. Leaping Clear, and various other journals. Emily received a Pushcart Prize nomination in 2019. Her chapbook is titled Shaft of Light. So, welcome, Emily.
Thank you very much. I do want to thank Steve and Lisa for arranging this opportunity to gather, and also to Barbara and Rick and Sandra for sharing your writing. Wonderful. I have been thinking a lot about this pandemic time. And like a lot of you, I've been thinking, how will we weather it? And I've wondered if there's actually an invitation during this very weird time. And I've come to realize that people with dementia, like my sister-in-law, have a lot to teach me about how to move through this time. And she teaches me about the simplicity of the present moment, what Thich Nhat Hanh calls present moment, wonderful moment. And there's a simplicity in our relationship. And the thing I love about poetry is that it can capture that present wonderful moment in all of its simplicity. California dementia. Fires. Something to do with fires. Are there fires? Was it a dream? Or are there fires? There were fires last year, but no fires now. There was a fire, the house burned down. Do you know how I met John? We met as teachers. You told me once, but tell me again. What did you say about fires? Are there fires? Was it a dream? Not to worry. there are no fires. Did you know John taught math and I taught PE? There was a fire. I think there was. The house burned down and my doll burned up in the house. Did I tell you how I met John? I love that story of how you met John. Tell me again. Here is a poem I wrote that was in Flying South last year. I thought I would share this one. I wrote this one for Doctors Without Borders. Katie did. Home a week, sand and dust still cling to my girl's clothes, fall out of her boots. Memories lurk in the shadows. Slow shuffle of feet, thousands of feet march through her dreams. Hands strain for rice, clean water, a place to rest, a gate to enter. Babies strapped to mothers' backs. Toddlers hushed with hunger, search for a hand to hold with gauze wrapped, handless arms. She wonders, how did I stay so long? She loves mountain nights thick with moisture, rise and fall of katydids droning their lullabies. Katie did, she didn't. Katie did, she didn't. Now, in our field of sweet meadow grass, a single katydid lands on her leg, then her hand. She watches his long, leaf-like body, slender antennae search her palm. She stretches out onto the warm earth, waits, listens for the pulsing thrum that washes a body clean. Now, in our field of sweet meadow grass, a single katydid lands on her leg, then her hand. She watches his long, leaf-like body, slender antennae search her palm. She stretches out onto the warm earth, waits, listens for the pulsing thrum that washes a body clean. And as Reynolds Price once said at a reading I attended, a moment of shameless self-promotion. I want to read from my book, Shaft of Light. I had the good fortune of spending 30 days of silence and solitude in a convent in Oxford, England, back in 2014. I stayed with the Sisters of the Love of God. And one I wrote during that time. And here is a poem from that time. Monastery Afternoon. Today I roamed unfamiliar streets and walkways past schoolyards, Victorian homes, corner shops. Found a boathouse here, a park path there, followed through open fields and tunnels of trees that always led back to a street. Now, all is quiet outside the cloister. Inside, midday breeze ruffles blue and white striped curtains. I rest on my bed, listen to children on scooters push their way home for naps. Enclosed in these walls, I work my way through a labyrinth of prayer, in the way I once wandered home from school, stretching my boundaries, testing my nerve. Will I risk a new street, a new turn? Will I go far enough to feel brave, or too far and be lost? Today, I roamed unfamiliar streets and walkways past schoolyards, Victorian homes, corner shops, found a boathouse here, a park path there, followed through open fields and tunnels of trees that always led back to a street. Now all is quiet outside the cloister. Inside, midday breeze ruffles blue and white striped curtains. I rest on my bed, listen to children on scooters push their way home for naps. Enclosed in these walls, I work my way through a labyrinth of prayer. In the way I once wandered home from school, stretching my boundaries, testing my nerve. Will I risk a new street, a new turn? Will I go far enough to feel brave, or too far and be lost?
There you go. Well, that's a shame. We had a technical difficulty with Emily. We lost you. It was beautiful poetry, what I heard so far. California Dementia, which I believe was the first one she read, was the poem that is in this issue of Flying South 2020. So if you've got your issue, be sure to read that again. It's a powerful poem. It's also was interesting that when I read it, there were no fires in California. And now when I've read it prior to this reading, there were now. Oh, there she is.
I'm back. I'm back. Great. Well, hello. I think what I will do then, I don't know how far we got. So I'm going to read St. Bride's Bay, written for my husband. Maybe you heard me say Wales is an important part of our life, and St. Bride's Bay is on the coast of Southwest Wales. So I'll begin this poem again, and let's see if I can get through it before I'm bumped off. Wildflowers drape hillsides here, heather, white sea campion, English bluebells, bright gorse, the color of English mustard, suffuses the air with its coconut scent, tumbles over banks and cliffs of deep purple, muted turquoise, and vivid pink, while above, seagulls flash silver across the bay, quarrel mid-air over a fresh new meal. Waves swirl across shoal and reef, swish shoreline and boulders like silk rustling through seagrass. You stand at ease, backpack and walking stick at your feet. You lean into ancient chants at the edge of this world, where old monks lay down, waited for ocean fog to shroud them. You stand at ease, backpack and walking stick at your feet. You lean into ancient chants at the edge of this world, where monks lay down, waited for ocean fog to shroud them. When David and I married, along with David came 3 wonderful boys. And one of those boys, thank you very much, is here. And I wrote a poem for him some years ago, and I'd like to read it to him and to all of you. Light we can taste, for Luke. Luke, our family physicist, stands at the log splitter. Morning sun glints through misted trees, weaves a silver halo around his shoulders. Gas-powered engine sputters to life, offers steady rumble to the rhythm of cracking wood, background for my cup of tea. Only last night we sat together over glazed trout, pasta, and French white wine, my granddaughter fussy and tired. I think of how she is swimming in love, soaked to the bone, unaware of life-giving water that is hers to drink. Stepson, stepmother, I marvel I'm at the table. Sun rises to zenith, glances off hemlock and maple, finds the open deck, dries rain-soaked boards, warms potted plants, splashes gold across the kitchen walls, infuses air with light we can taste. Now he and I sit at the table, turkey and cheese sandwiches, fresh fruit, iced tea, bless our work of wood and words. We talk of things we love, physics, poetry, stardust and spirit, galaxies and transformation. I breathe in light and water, star and tree. I breathe in light and water, star and tree. And here is my last poem for you tonight. This was written for a friend of mine on his 80th birthday. Echoes of the word. Even as a child, I'm told you sense the light, the hidden life in old trees, arching bright in warm winds, whipping through the empty yard. Alone you stood, stripped of thought or word, and waited for wind to cease, for peace to come, the shadows to bend and release the sun. Did you know the holy held you in the waiting? In the twilight slowly unfolding, were you praying words of wonder? Did you hear echoes of your own hallowed hunger in the trill of sparrows and drone of bees spinning out sweetness, circling about you in sunlight thinning? Did you for a moment doubt that it was real, this silent meeting, these echoes of the word made visible, vibrant? Was it then you faintly heard? You too, an echo of my word. Did you know the holy held you in the waiting, in the twilight slowly unfolding? Were you praying words of wonder? Did you hear echoes of your own hallowed hunger in the trill of sparrows and drone of bees spinning out sweetness, circling about you in sunlight thinning? Did you for a moment doubt that it was real, this silent meeting, these echoes of the word made visible, vibrant? Was it then you faintly heard? You too, an echo of my word. You too, an echo of my word. Thank you very much for this opportunity. All done.
Thank you, Emily. Let me turn that down again. But that was beautiful. I love the spiritual side to your writing, and I can feel it in your voice. I can hear it and feel it in your voice. So it was all four of the readings were absolutely excellent. I believe we're going to have a short period for questions and answers. Yes, I see Lisa's just put if anyone has any questions. I'll start one out for Barbara. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the difference between writing for the page and writing for some of your performance videos and whether they help each other. So if we could hear from Barbara. Lisa, there she is.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the question. You're giving me a little too much credit. I don't think. Well, there's maybe one piece I just kind of wrote for video, but mostly I just performed stuff that I happen to have written. But the funny thing is, your question's kind of relevant because just in the process of practicing over these past 4 or 5 days for tonight, I've done a lot of editing on the piece. So what I performed tonight was pared down, just words and phrases here and there quite a bit from what I actually gave you and what's published. And it's just interesting. I mean, everyone always says, read it out loud, but it's when you're getting ready to perform. I mean, I think I'm so mindful of everybody's time, and I'm so grateful for anybody to be sitting quietly and listening at all. And so it just makes me want to, chop this phrase and that phrase and just have more and more economy. And also just as the words come through my mouth isn't always agile enough to process them all. So there's been some interesting cuts in the text, just in these last few days. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions coming up. If anybody has anything out there, just add them into the comments, and we can keep going. I'd like to ask Rick about. I thought that his story had the story that he published in Flying South had less to do with the background in mental health than the story he read tonight, and I found that interesting. And so I'm wondering how often Rick writes about his background, because it's a background to those of us who have no exposure to working with mental patients. That's fascinating.
Thanks for the question, Steve. Actually, this is the only story that I've directly, sort of directly reflected the whole world of people challenged by psychiatric disabilities and how one might go about interacting with, those people, et cetera. But I do think that even in the story that was published in Flying South, An Unfortunate Rescue, that I do find myself drawing upon people that I've known in the course of my career of delivering mental health services and supervising and consulting, et cetera. And there's just something about, to me, people are people independent of disability or not having a disability. And sometimes the universal lessons that one can gain from paying attention to people who do have a mental illness is something that can be reflected on the page in a character who doesn't. So that's my answer.
Okay, very powerful story, and the one in this issue of Flying South is extremely powerful. So thank you for both those stories. I guess I'll move on. I don't see any questions from the other attendees yet. So I'll move on with asking Sandra a very similar question to what I asked Barbara. How did your theater background, do you think, how much did that help with your writing background? If Sandra's still there. Maybe she can't hear me. She couldn't hear me before.
That's right.
So, okay. Well, then let's move on and ask a question of Emily. When you were frozen before, I was mentioning that California Dementia to me is a very different poem reading it now than when I first read it, because there is no, there are fires now, and there weren't fires in March when I first read it. So the comfort that was being offered to the dementia patient was true in the beginning when I first read it, and now is false. And I wondered if that changed your opinion of your own poem.
You know, it doesn't change. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't change my opinion of the poem, because the poem really captures a moment in time. And so that was that moment. And if I were to speak to her today, I don't even know if fires would come up. I don't even know if she would know there were fires. She might, and she might not.
Right.
But what's more important in some ways is not whether there were fires actually happening or not, but the fact that we had that moment together. We could share that moment together and not expect anything of her other than what was in that moment, and just enjoy her company as it was.
Right.
Why no sound?
Yeah, I know our poetry editor, Mary, fell in love with how you described a moment of talking to someone with dementia with less sentimentality than you would expect. So I think that was powerful. That made it powerful.
Well, there's that. It's the simplicity, and also some poetry and some writing about dementia. It's about the sadness we feel, the loss, the grief, watching someone disappear. And for me, this has been about being with her as she is and appreciating who she is. But it's a very simple conversation.
It's a beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
Sandra, maybe we can unmute you and get my question to you was,
Oh my God.
if you could, can you hear me, Sandra? Not if you can hear me.
I don't know what happened.
Okay, I'll ask it in the comments.
Okay. I just don't know. Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. Let's see. I wanted to talk about my theater background.
Turn it up.
I think that my theater background has influenced me greatly in many ways, and I think for writing purposes, whether it's prose or if it's poetry, it's trained me to be very my sensory awareness at all times. You know, what I see, what I hear, things that kinesthetic, motion, trained to observe very, very carefully. When I was at the, I guess, American Academy of Dramatic Art, I was only 20. We had so much training. I guess that I was very young, but I took it really seriously. So I practiced, and through each role that I got, I would use the standards, that I felt my teachers had held the bar very high. So when I started writing, it seemed like it would flow, would kind of flow out, and I do a lot of editing, like driving while editing. I don't do that, but I do a lot of editing. Keep coming back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and cutting and condensing. But I like to keep the truth, as palpable and mute as a globed fruit. I don't know where I heard that, but just kind of concise but real. And when I finish a poem and it feels real, I almost feel like I've been there. I'm in that place. And I could be 12 or I could be, 62 or whatever. I'm not revealing my true age, but I will be older soon. But yeah, I think teaching drama as well to young children does have certain there are good things about it. And there are certain things that, I'm taking an elegy class with Tom Lombardo now. And I can't imagine reading any of these elegies in the same way that I read these poems. It's almost like a totally different persona. But playing all different kinds of characters is really helpful in understanding that I think we all have many characters alive inside of us that just want to come out and talk. And that helps with dialogue as well, hearing the way the accents people have and the silences, the pauses, and the way dialogue isn't very even. And but thanks for asking the question. It was a great question.
Well, I'm getting feedback here, but I think there's no more questions, so that's about it for the night. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and I noticed Lisa has just put up the link that you can use to see the to see this over again, or to recommend it to friends to see. I think this was just a superb evening of reading, and I hope all these authors will apply next year to Flying South, and a lot of the people in attendance will apply as well. So thank you all for coming. And that's it for me.
Mm.